Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Evolved Caveman. I'm Dr. John Schinnerer, and today I'm really pleased to have as my guest Rebecca Berke. Rebecca is a longtime friend and also a hypnotherapist and mindfulness specialist at the Comprehensive Wellness Center in Walnut Creek. She works with clients on stress management, a variety of habit control issues, as well as performance anxiety and transformational coaching. Rebecca's lifelong career in dance has given her the knowledge of the powerful mind-body connection. She currently is the Associate Director of the Professional Diablo Ballet School. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Hi, John. Good to be here.
So let's start off with, before we get into our discussion on habits, let's start off with the typical question of tell me a story of you at your very best.
Okay, so the struggle to get to my very best, which, to me, feeling my best is feeling calm, confident, and creative. So a struggle to get there is when I get thrown off my routine. I'm a list maker. I'm a schedule keeper. I like that. It feels good to me. So when I have a life occurrence that I didn't plan but have to have, then I get thrown off. So recently, I had to have major surgery, so I had to change my schedule. I couldn't exercise like I like to in the morning. Thrown off my schedule. First of all, I didn't get my good endorphins that I like to have from exercise, as well as it just kind of messed up my schedule. I mean, it just threw me. So I like to think of the story about the master sensei when he was asked, how do you stay in balance and control all the time? And he answers, it's not that I do. I just recognize when I'm not. So that has been very influential in me in maintaining calm, confidence, and creativity, is to know when I'm off. So when I was off this last little bit in recovery, I recognized what else I can do in that time. And the creativity started to come. First of all, the recognition that I'm aware that I'm healing. My body is doing something very good for it to maintain good health. So I'm healing, giving myself those healing energy thoughts, as well as just recognizing that what else can I do in that time that maybe I haven't had time to do. So it returned me again from the struggle of being knocked off to then coming back to feeling like more like I would like to.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, and I think it's a nice segue into our discussion today about habits.
Yes.
That, we humans are creatures of habit, and there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of us get into patterns of bad habits or habits that don't serve us. And as soon as we get into habits, they become unconscious, automatic, and we do them without thinking about it. Drinking,
right.
Smoking,
That's right.
Being sedentary, watching TV, that sort of thing.
That's right.
And the opposite is true also, that if we can get, or when we get into positive habits, we do those without thinking about them too. And that's really the goal to me. So let's talk a little bit about habits today. And let's start by talking about some of the habits that you've helped people to change over the years.
Okay, well, you already mentioned two of them, smoking and drinking. Smoking or vaping, all kinds of substances have been recently a habit that, smoking, especially cigarettes, has always been a habit that hypnotherapists have been very useful, and it's been benefit to people who want to change that habit. But even more so now with different substances and vaping, it's become more apparent. And I see people with that. I see people with cell phone addiction that want to, it's interfering with their relationships. It's interfering with what they want to get done. So I've been seeing that kind of a habit is too much cell phone use or just technology use, some video game use. And then there's just the old ones of procrastination, which you kind of mentioned before, inability to kind of move off where you're at, as well as just the old ones of kind of self-soothing, like picking, scratching, sucking your thumb, except it changes later into other kinds of things, hands in the mouth, biting nails, all those kinds of things.
Do you get into trichotillomania?
Yes, the pulling of hair.
Can't really
yes.
do it, but
yeah, you can't do it. Okay. So that would be one way of. Yes. Okay. So, and it's the eyebrows, eyelashes, pick a favorite spot on your head. So yes, that's the pulling of hair. Sometimes the feeling of it, sometimes people don't pull it all the way out. Sometimes they do, becomes a real issue because most people want to find a favorite place. So that's one of those habits that develop from self-soothing as a child, right? And so, yes, I do work with people like that, and it's been very effective, some of the tools. Usually one of the ways that they decide that they want to change this is it starts to cut into their self-esteem, and they don't feel very good about themselves.
Back up just for a second.
Sure.
Let's go to the cell phone addiction. So
okay.
How do people, what's the motivation there? How do they realize, wow, this is a real problem. I need to get some help with this? Because that one is so prevalent. And I think we all are to a degree addicted to our cell phones. How does someone get to that point of oh my God, I need help with this?
Okay, quick story. A few years ago, a man came to me and he said, I need to work on this. This is important to me. And I said, well, because I was in the inquiry, I'm very curious about what was the driving force that said, okay, this is enough. I need to change this. And he told me that he was out to dinner with his wife. I think it was their maybe 10th anniversary, and he had planned, and they have a really good, I'm sure they still do, this was years ago, or not that many years, maybe 3-4 years ago, really great relationship, and he wanted to really treat her, so he had made reservations at this restaurant they wanted to go to, and it was just going to be this wonderful, fabulous evening. And so he picks her up, they're all ready, they go to the restaurant, they're sitting there, and he gets a call from work. And he says, just a minute, sweetie, and he attends to it, texts back. Then there's another one, someone has a question, it's a group text, I think he said, on and on and on. And then he gets one that says, and he just, a couple of times he says, just a minute, So then he gets one that says, this is a beautiful restaurant. I love being here. I wish you were here with me, from his wife. So he, there was no reprimands, no kind of punishment from her. She just sincerely wished he could be there with her. And he said that was it. He knew that he needed help in being so attached to the phone and not being able to put it away when the time was appropriate. And he had such a strong desire. We worked on it a couple of times, and great. He's been able to place those kinds of things where they need to be, because we all love technology, right? It's great, Absolutely. It's useful, and it's very useful in our lives, but there is a time and a place, and it certainly doesn't serve when you're out to dinner with your spouse or a loved one.
Well, I find it's always interesting for me with my clients to see how they interact with their phone when we're in session.
Yes.
Because some people will go, oh, sorry, let me just turn this off and put it down. Some people will say, oh, let me get this call. And I'm like,
yes.
All right, take the call. It's an expensive call. I hope it's worth it.
So I do, when my clients come in, I ask them if they will turn off and silence their phone. Because we are teaching that I am doing some hypnotic kinds of exercises with them, and then the deeper work that I record. So I ask them to silence their phone. And ahead of time, I've told them that. Some can and some can't. If they are dealing with some anxiety, I will tell them that they can put it by me and what's the number or the person that they need to be alerted to. And so they'll usually do that if they're not quite ready to silence their phone.
Yeah, I think it does bring up anxiety for many people.
Yes, it does. It does.
So go into a little bit, walk me through what it looks like a typical session for you, because I'm not sure many people know what it looks like and feels like to go to a hypnotherapist.
Right. So usually they've tried all different kinds of things, and they figure out that, well, this is what they say to me, is they didn't have the willpower, so they want me to give them the willpower. So, lots of times they will plop down in my chair and they will say, fix me. So then it's the whole discussion of the history behind it, what has worked, what hasn't worked, even for a short period of time. So there's getting to know the issue and what they want to do. I get from them, I send out a questionnaire, John, before they come. And sometimes they fill it out and sometimes they don't, but it's just very basic about the history of the habit, what they've done before, like I said, what's worked, what doesn't. And then this is the most important part about it. If they did not have this habit, what would their life look like? And so they really get creative. Right then and there, their subconscious mind starts to work. So in the first part of the session, it depends on the pre-talk has to really do with how much fear they have around hypnosis. Some of them are very fearful. Some of them just want help, and so they just say, fix me, which then I empower them to know that they will fix themselves. I'm just an agent for that.
For a second?
Sure,
So
yes.
what is that? It seems to me that fear of hypnosis has to do with a fear of loss of control.
Yes, that's right.
Primary?
Yes, and so it comes from, I think they've seen stage shows or they've seen movies where there are hypnotists and people, you know, like in stage shows, they'll do just kind of really funny things, and then and they know that person. But then I explained to them that a person wouldn't do that if they didn't want to, that they have a good desire. I have friends who are stage hypnotists, and they say that their favorite people to come up on stage is they will watch when people come in. I have one particular friend who does a lot of state fairs, and he says, you know, he'll watch from the sidelines as people come in. And if there's a man there bringing in his family and he's ushering them all in, and the hypnotist knows that he bought all the tickets, right? He wants his family to have a good time. And so if that man then raises his hand and he wants to be a participant in the stage show, the hypnotist is going to choose him. Why? Because he wants everybody to have a good time. So he will maybe do things that he normally wouldn't do, you know, like bark like a dog and cluck like a chicken and all the rest of it. But he wants his family to have fun. That's his primary motivator. So if you were asked to do something that was against your moral compass, so to speak, or your core values, you would never do it. So those people in those stage shows are doing things mostly because they want to have fun, and they also want the people they're with to have fun. So I dispel the fears like that. I give a few personal examples of, from my viewpoint, about being a participant in a stage show, about something I didn't feel comfortable with. I just said, no, that's not me. So I didn't do that. So I dispel any fears they might have around hypnotism. I let them know that they are in charge. What I'm doing is I'm uncovering their best sense of how to live their life and making that foremost in their mind. So I do, after we dispel fears, and I talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and explain about that and about how their subconscious mind is, you know, perpetuated this habit because it felt good at some point. But also the subconscious mind is telling them, because they're there, that they can change it. So they already have another message that's coming from the subconscious mind that wants us to thrive and do better. So after I've given them dispelled fears and given them the idea of the powerful mind-body connection to change habit, then we talk about how, you know, like in the questionnaire, what their life would look like without that habit, what they would rather be doing, how it would be beneficial to them to be habit-free.
Yeah, and you know, I've done hypnotherapy with you in the past.
Yes.
And
yes.
I found it really helpful to deal with stress at the time. And to me, I look at it as, you know, so I remember sitting in the chair. It's quite relaxing. You induce a state of relaxation in me. And then to me, there's positive messages that are introduced into the subconscious, which
Yes.
I think have a harder time getting in if you're not as relaxed.
That's right.
And so then you record it on a CD, and then I listen to it over and over. So part of the process of feeding these messages into my subconscious is also repetition.
That's right. That's right. So, and it used to be, Dr. Milton Erickson was a psychiatrist that really brought hypnotherapy into the realm of making positive change for people. In that he started all of his studies and his clinical trials in the 1970s showed that if a person has a desire to change, they will. Mm-hmm. And so now we have, with brain science, particularly in the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen how we connect those new messages, like you said, those new positive messages into the subconscious mind, actually builds a bridge. So the repetition or the repeating of them really makes them strong. Not like you're ever going to forget that you had that habit, but you'll have more of a compassionate feeling to yourself around it. I needed it then. At some point, it must have felt good. Then it became so it wasn't for my best and highest good. So then that's the repetition. So that's why I make the recordings. I always give people tools to know how to self-hypnotize, because really all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. Mm-hmm. I just guide through the recorded part of it, but everyone's doing it for themselves, really. And whatever happens as far as the relaxation goes, some people go deeply right away. Some people go lightly. Most people kind of go in the middle. I just always tell them that with that desire to change, doesn't matter how much they relax, they'll make that change.
Yeah, thank you for going through that. Because I think a lot of people have some doubts about going to a hypnotherapist, and to me it's one tool that you can use to get through bad habits, yes, or make positive behavioral changes. So let's right. circle back to the discussion about habits. And are there any other reasons that people come in to seek to change bad habits? For me, working with a lot of men, it's often the partner in their life saying, yes, you need to go talk to someone.
Yes, exactly true. Sometimes it's a new partner. There was a young man that saw me a couple of years ago. He was in a new relationship. He was a smoker, and he didn't want this new relationship to know that he was a smoker. So he was doing oh my goodness, showering, cleaning his hat. It was just the routine he would go through before he would see this new interest was just horrendous. And he just said it was wearing him out. He was exhausted. So that was definitely his motivator. Another, and he was successful too. He found something else he could do out on his deck. And that was, he picked up a Native American flute and started playing the Native American flute. He said not well, but he enjoyed it. And it gave him that break and something else to do with his hands and his mouth. So it worked perfectly. Another motivator is more money in their pocket. So that's always something to recognize. So that's a motivator.
Yeah, I'm always amazed how expensive a pack of cigarettes is.
Yes, it certainly is. It really is. Sometimes it's example. A lot of times people want to change habits because, especially with, around the cell phone addiction, we talked about that. It's kids, do they want their children to see them always on their phone, or doing any other kind of bad habit that's not for their best health and well-being? So it's sometimes people in our lives, sometimes it's chipping away at self-esteem because they feel, absolutely slave to this habit. Sometimes they feel, it's just being stuck and they want to move off. Sometimes it's time consuming. It's more time that they want to spend doing the habit rather than being productive and creative. And so it's that's what I hear a lot. I'm stuck. I'm really stuck and I'm not doing what I want to do because I organize my life around having, time to do this thing I don't really want to do anymore.
One of the things we look at with clients is how much time do you spend thinking about it? Like, yes, if you're doing something, are you thinking about the next fix, next hit? How much damage is it doing to relationships? Yes. Some of those are some of the questions that I'll ask.
That's right. And just their image. How do you, like you said, in time, how much time, but also they'll say, I don't want to be perceived as that guy. Mm-hmm. Or I don't want to be known as that person who does that. It's kind of a little cliche around is I don't want to be that person, Mm-hmm. So then they decide that, that habit is not them, which we all know that, at our core self. We wouldn't be tied to any habit. So when they decide that and they're given that, though, okay, yes, I have control over that substance. That substance doesn't have control over me. I can choose. And it's like, that's one of the very basic hypnotic suggestions I give them, is to cut the bond. They can reach out if they choose, but there's not any kind of, food, like if we're talking about weight management, especially, around holiday time, and people are going to lots of different holiday parties, lots of choices, is that food does not have control over you. You can choose what's going to serve you. Make that choice and feel good about the choice. It was your choice, not the food's choice.
Yeah, it's interesting. A big part of this, I think, is awareness.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
I was talking earlier, these are unconscious automatic habits. And so
yes.
I've talked to clients about drinking, for example, and just being aware of the triggers for the
Yes.
urge to want to grab a drink as you go throughout the day. And they're everywhere. I mean, like Monday night football is a trigger. Going out to dinner is a trigger. Like
Yes.
hanging out with friends is a trigger. Going out to
Right.
a bar is a trigger. Going past a liquor store is a trigger. I mean,
Yes.
everything is tied into
Yes.
alcohol for us in this day and
Yes.
age. And so every social event involves alcohol just about. So,
Mhm.
to just be curious about and look at what are the urges or what are the emotions connected with this habit? Is it boredom? Is it excitement? Is it anger, sadness, anxiety, stress? Because I found that emotions underlie every habit, every urge that we have to use that's out there.
Right. So the confusing, and so you're exactly right. Bringing awareness to what is the trigger, and around food and drinking is confused messages. I mean, we would like to say. I mean, I have. I've raised 4 children, and every time I fed them as babies, I don't think the thought process was, I'm going to nourish this baby. I think the first thought was, I would like to comfort and soothe and have this baby stop crying. So we are soothed with food from the very time we were tiny, tiny babies. That was the thought. And then, if you didn't have really psychologically minded parents, which in my generation, they weren't really thinking. So, it was like, here's a cookie, you'll feel better. Or for me, it was like, you get it. And for my brothers who, could eat everything they wanted, it's like, eat all your food and you get the nickel under your dish. And then later on, it was like, don't eat that, Rebecca, that will make you fat. So it was like very confusing messages. But the soothing part around food and drink is something that once you recognize, and the awareness to it, then you can recognize, okay, am I really hungry, or am I bored? Or am I just stressed? Maybe I just need to take a walk. Maybe I don't really need to eat that, piece of pizza that's left over. Maybe I need to just go for a walk. Maybe I need to give myself a break and just sit down and read a book I've been wanting to read. So that's the awareness of the other emotions you're speaking about. So that's what I talk to them about, and to get little ideas that every time there's a trigger, you take a breath, you see what's there. Am I aware? Am I aware of what I'm feeling in the moment? And that's the first step. That is opening up the subconscious mind, giving yourself another better choice to respond to that emotion.
Yeah, and then the next step, I think, is really working on self-compassion, that inner voice to speak to yourself with kindness.
Yes.
When you do screw up, when you do regress,
yes.
when you do make a mistake, because
yes.
that's going to happen too. That's part of the process. And it's funny, I've been talking to clients recently about looking at that inner critic inside you, because we all have different voices in our mind. And, one of them I think of as the sort of angry, tantruming 5-year-old, and one's the petulant, rebellious 15-year-old, and then you have that adult in you. And I think usually if you think of that inner critic as the 5-year-old typically yelling at you, so let's say it's food and you have a piece of cake and then you're like, oh my God, that inner critic starts yelling at you. You're such a loser. You're always screwing up your diet. If you turn towards that inner critic with some compassion and love and acceptance, and just say, hey, yeah, I hear that you're upset with me. It's okay. It's going to be okay. I think that's a better way to go than to fight with yourself and get angry with yourself and leading to that kind of shame spiral, which typically leads to more of the behavior that you don't want.
That's right. That's right. Forgiving ourselves for having the habit in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or for making that mistake, which we all do. I mean, join the human race, and we're going to make mistakes. But to recognize, like you said, with a self-compassionate heart, and for many, I will say, how do you speak to yourself? And lots of times they will say it is with that inner critic very harshly. So then I say, well, do you have a nephew or a son or someone that has made a mistake, and how did you comfort them? Someone always has somebody that they know. So then I say, how did you speak to them? What did you say to them? And then that's the voice you say to yourself. And I'll do that as a practice sometimes. I will just have them close their eyes, go inward, take a few deep breaths, which is the best hypnotic induction you can do, is just take a few of those relaxing breaths. Let the exhale be a little longer than the inhale. And then they tune into that place of they can do that. And then now think of the last time you spoke harshly to yourself, and then use those same words, that same voice, that same tone. And there's just a softness, a clarity that comes touching into that place within them of self-compassion, like you said, and also forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Once they've understood that basically they just needed a break, or maybe they needed to calm down. Maybe they were overstressed or overworked or overtired, and they just needed a break. And then it said, okay, now I understand. So next time that awareness comes in again, I'm going to pause. I'll take that breath, and then I'll respond in a healthier way rather than react in just going to whatever is before you, which may not be healthy.
I think that, one of the things that's fascinating about that self-compassionate voice versus that inner critic voice is both voices have the same motivation. They're both trying to get us to improve that behavior and be better and do better.
That's
they just
right.
go about it in two dramatically different ways. One's yelling at you, the other one's trying to be kind and understanding. And what we found in research is that using that self-compassionate voice more frequently actually lets you become more resilient. So you bounce back more quickly, you're more emotionally centered. It's a much better way to go, and it's been found to be even more powerful than self-esteem. So there's a lot of research behind it. And, my experience in working with this topic with men is that a lot of men struggle with this topic because it's so foreign to us. And so it really takes a little bit of work and some time and practice to begin to get it.
Yes, that's right. And I think that I have worked with men who do say to me, but I don't want to lose my edge. You won't lose your edge. So I have them maybe talk about that part of them that does want that kind of, really go-to kind of attitude and that, that drive. And sometimes that yelling at them is just that part has lots of drive and ambition and ideas, and it's a good part, but it's overworking. Mm-hmm. And sometimes to ask that part, what do you need from me to not overwork in a destructive way? Because I know you're good at what you do. You have lots of drive and ambition and ideas, and you motivate me. But how can I be a little kinder in a more positive way? And usually it's around that taking time for self-care, having a balance, and they come up with it. That other part of them comes up with ideas to talk to the part that's overworking, that's harsh, that gets harsh. And usually that drive, that forceful part can say, okay, now I can do what I can do better. I can be a motivator. That edge, as I often hear from men, can actually have a lot of clarity and focus when they don't have to yell.
I think the question is, well, what if your edge got sharper, better, more honed? What if you worked better with other people as a result? What if you had more stamina and creativity as a result?
That's right. Those are the benefits. Absolutely. So there's many, many benefits. And once I see a client and I start to do this inquiry with them, these kinds, their wisdom, I think sometimes, I can see it on their face. Their wisdom surprises them. And I actually say, this is surprising you. Sometimes I say, this is surprising you. Yes, I haven't felt this clear and focused in a long time. Which they oftentimes, I didn't know hypnosis was like this. Well, it's tapping into that inner knowledge that maybe you've covered up with defenses or habits or, yes. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about habit substitution a little bit. And what are some of because I think habit substitution is a great way to go in terms of substituting a similar sort of behavior for a destructive behavior. One of the things that I loved was a client that I had was stopping smoking. And so he cut straws into about 2-inch lengths, and he would just suck on straws, which gave him the same behavior as sucking on a cigarette. It was just far healthier.
That's right. That's right. So what I talk to them about when we, besides the awareness of the triggers and all of what we've been talking about, is what else they can do. And I have, for different things, I have ideas like that. Cinnamon toothpicks, those kinds of things. The Ericksonian kind of confusion idea is to designate a time, and have to do it at that time. That's the only time you can do it. And pretty soon the confusion and the thinking is, and it goes, I don't want to do that anymore like that. But you're right. We don't do well, especially with smoking or with weight management. We don't do well with deprivation. So what else feels good? He came up, it's always better, and I always give the suggestion, ideas will come to you, because like your client, the idea came to him. So that was amazing for him. He made another choice, felt good. So I give ideas, but I always say to them, you'll find something. Like I said about the man who started playing the Native American flute, that was his choice. Sometimes, they do these things just to take a break. So what do you like about going outside and smoking? Well,
exactly. I think it's a forced break. Like you just go outside and you literally breathe deeply for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes. Or drink a bottle of water, and how good that feels to hydrate yourself.
Go outside, go for a walk.
Yes, or go for a walk.
I also like the idea of substituting a drink if you're trying to stop drinking. Like substitute soda water for the vodka soda or vodka tonic. Substitute a non-alcoholic beer for the beer, like because you same release.
Exactly. And I also encourage them to make it pleasurable. Like if they love to drink out of wine glasses, and put ice water or bubbly water or whatever you want in the wine, but it's the aesthetic of drinking out of the wine glass. It's taking care of yourself. It's like, I deserve to drink out of this glass. I'm going to sit back and read my magazine and sip out of this beautiful glass. So it's sometimes not even the substance that started in that glass. It's the mere act of the ritual. So we start talking about changing the ritual. And sometimes it means taking it away, but always replacing it with something else you like, so people come up with ideas about that too. Well, I've always wanted to do needlepoint or or learn something, and well, now's your time to do it. And because lots of times it is about giving yourself that break.
And for some of these habits, I think it's about finding something to do with the nervous energy that goes to our hands. I mean, I think
it is,
or scratching or picking, things like that, like to
That's
substitute
right.
something else, like you were talking about, like needlepoint, or crochet, or knitting, something that you can do with your hands that isn't the habit that you want to switch out of.
Right. So when you were talking about self-compassion, they have discovered in the research, Dr. Kristen Neff do you know about her, University of Texas? Okay, so she has come up with the idea of touch, and we forget as we age that we still need to self-soothe. So she talks about hand on cheek.
Yeah, or hand on heart.
Hand on heart. Hand on the back of your neck.
Or hugging yourself.
Forehead.
Your body doesn't know
that
it's not someone else giving you a hug.
Yes, hugging yourself. That's right. So all those kinds of things that you can do for even clasped hands feel good, you know, one way or the other way. So that's something very simple that you can do with your hands near your face, you know, as well as what we talked about before, drinking water. That is a gratification in that way. It's just the movement, right? Like I said about other things people do with their hands, stitching, drawing, doodling, all of those things that we thought were childhood kinds of things. We have to recognize that we did them as children because they felt good. Just because we're grown up doesn't mean that we can't do those self-soothing kinds of things. We just need to do them in healthy ways that feel good. And then people come up with all different kinds of new ideas. You know, and the best thing, one of the things is going back to actually reading real books and touching the pages. I've heard that recently from a man I was working with, is that he was a young man, so lots of things were read on computer screens and that kind of thing. And so now he's into collecting books and turning the pages. Very tactile, very gratifying.
Smell of a book too, to me. So I think part of it's about bringing in all the senses.
Bringing in all the senses. So I always talk about that.
What are some ways that you do self-care?
Well, basically all of the things that I talk about, I've all done. I mean, I've done myself. You know, it used to be that, you know, the body language of crossed arms was bad, but now, and I always loved to cross my arms. It felt good, like you were talking about the hug. So I'm finding myself that I will do it now, and I don't feel like, oh, I'm giving people the wrong message, you know, like I'm closing off. Both hands on top, like this, and just, and people, and then I find people then start to do it too. So that's one thing I do, particularly if I'm just gently, elbows down. So it's not like the traditional folded arms, like, you know, stiffness, but shoulders down, hands on your arms. And it just feels very, very comforting. I find myself doing that. The other thing that I didn't know that I was doing, you mentioned hand on heart. I went out to lunch with one of my adult daughters a couple months ago, and she says, "Mother, you eat with your left hand on your heart." And I said, well, I'm having such a good time and it just feels good. I guess I'm enhancing it. So I guess that's become an automatic now. And then just some of the things that I liked books. I don't like to read. I mean, I read for information sometimes on my tablet or laptop, but I will read a book. I love to walk. Listen to music, all those kinds of things, and listen to music that isn't necessary, just music. So those are some of the things that I do on a daily basis. And I feel if I do things like that on a daily basis, work them into my routine, then a lot of the chaos of the world tends to remain not on my periphery, and within me, I can stay calm and confident and creative.
Yeah, and I think part of it is knowing your tendencies. So are you extroverted or are you introverted? Do you get energy from being with people or being alone? I mean, for me, I like going to lunch by myself with a book and enjoying my food and reading, or getting a massage, or going to live comedy or live music. That's typically with someone. But I get my energy from being alone or one-on-one.
I do too.
Yeah.
So I as well. And so I'm kind of a mix, because I love energy from people and bouncing ideas off from them and getting to know them and all of those kinds of things. But I also do need my alone time. And
extroverted, introverted on a 1 to 10 scale. So you can be anywhere on there. I tend to be a 4 towards the introverted side. So I can be more extroverted. I just find I need to recover and get some energy by being alone after that.
Yes, I think that's true for me. I think it's true for many healers. because of the healing energy that you're putting out all of the time, like you are, is that it's the time to replenish. And sometimes that needs to be, I'm not saying they're all like that, but it tends to be coming from self to self, owning your own healing powers, as they say, heal the healer. Mm-hmm. And then the extroverted part can come out and be there with a real solid core, Anyway, that is how it is for me.
All right. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to add, or what should I have asked you?
I think that basically the thing about habits is to recognize that it's not our fault that we have them or that they developed. Most everyone has one. If someone comes and they're seeing you or me or anyone about a habit, that is the biggest step. And that needs to be congratulated. Mm-hmm. And they need to really, appreciate and sense a deep sense of gratitude to themselves for being aware, having that awareness, because we all have the need to soothe. We all have the need to feel okay. And as we grow and develop, sometimes bad habits are picked up. Not sometimes, pretty much everyone has one at some point. But that awareness needs to be, okay, I have the awareness. So I would just like to emphasize that, John. And I know you know that, but I think that sense of gratitude that a person has come to that awareness is paramount.
I think it's a great point. I think to me that congratulating or celebrating the awareness, but then also the courage to come in and see someone is a big freaking deal. So every man that comes in to see me, I congratulate them or compliment them on the courage for having come in just to talk. Because
that's right. That's right.
And I like the idea that it's not our fault and it's our responsibility.
Yes,
so it's
that's
not
right.
our fault that I have a bad habit. However, it's my responsibility to find ways to improve that or change it.
That's right. I mean, that's all about, being a responsible human is growth and development. Mm-hmm. You being a human being in the world, knowing what we like, what we don't like, and how we can change that's our responsibility. Not just push, do, not a human doing, but a human being on this planet. So I think that's great to recognize, like you said.
So if anyone would like to contact you, how can they get a hold of you? What's the social media?
On Instagram, it's at Rebecca Hypnosis. Facebook, Rebecca Berke, at BCH. I'm at Comprehensive Wellness in Walnut Creek, which is comprehensivewellness.org website. Also I have my personal website, which is hypnosisforchange.us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
And that's it for this episode of The Evolved Caveman.